welcome to Middle Fingers Up, the show where we hold our heads high and our middle fingers higher. I'm your host, Kieran McKay. Today, I'm very thrilled to have a very special guest with us, Urmi Hossain. Urmi is a Bengali by blood, Italian by birth, and now resides in Canada. She is a leader in the financial services industry, a self-published author, speaker, blogger, polyglot, and I also learned what that word is recently, so I hope I said it right, but it's a fancy way of saying she's a woman that can speak many languages. She's also a mentor who is passionate about women's empowerment, and I love this. And you guys know I love this because this is what we talk about all day on this show. Urmi's recently penned a powerful book titled Discovering Your Identity, where she shares the challenges of growing up as a third culture kid in Italy. And we're going to learn a little bit more about what that means. Through her reflections, she shares the struggle many South Asian girls face, particularly in balancing cultural expectations with the reality of life in the West. We all know this. This is another topic that we talk about a lot here. So you can imagine how excited I am to sit down today. I'm really looking forward to figuring out how Urmi's been navigating this cultural identity journey. Maybe she'll have some advice for us. I also want to know, as a brown girl, like what are the challenges she's faced growing up in the Western society, particularly in Europe, which is a little bit different than maybe how things went down here in North America. Overall, just very excited to talk to her about her approach to leadership, advocacy, and personal development. So let's welcome Urmi. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. You have a very long list of platforms that later I will get you to share where people can find you. So thank you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today on a Friday?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm happy that it's Friday. I'm happy that we have the long weekend.
Yeah, we do actually. Good reminder. Yeah. I kind of forgot. My kids just started school yesterday. So it's back to school. And already we have a long weekend. So how lucky are we?
Right? I'm happy about that.
And you're currently in Montreal, right? So how's the weather there right now at this time of year?
You know what? It was sunny this morning and now suddenly it's cloudy. And this week has been, it's been a nice week actually. We had like sunny days and it's not too hot. It's not too humid. So it's good for my hair. So yeah, it's been a nice weather, but I think tomorrow we have rain.
Oh yeah, it's starting. We had a really rainy day this week and it felt like the weather was telling us, okay, everyone, summer's ending. It's time to get ready. Winter's coming. So it was a very cold, rainy day, not a summer rain. So it's happening. Winter's around the corner. Here we go. You guys get a beautiful fall out there, though. I hear. I've never been, but I hear your fall's just gorgeous.
Yeah, I do like the fall season in Montreal because we have a lot of you can see different colors everywhere. So it's very pretty. Yeah. And I do like the fall weather or the fall season outfits. I think it's always very fancy and trendy. And we do have a lot of parks as well. So a lot of people do go for hiking in two parks just because they want to see the leaves changing colors. So it's very, very pretty.
Oh, that's pretty. We'll have to make our way down there. Okay, so I have to be very organized today because I have a big challenge. We have to do this recording in a certain time limit, and anyone that knows me, I've already failed. I suck at that. So I'm gonna just get us into it because I am really excited. You reached out. I'm very glad that we're able to put this together because I'm in my 40s and I'm going through this stuff late in life, the cultural identity stuff. And maybe I've gone through it in my 20s and 30s, but maybe I didn't know what it was in the way I know now, I think. And so learning a little bit about you when, I was preparing for this interview, it got me really excited and hopeful that, while I've started this podcast, I'm meeting so many South Asian women that are just trying their best to fill those gaps that we grew up in and are doing it in a way that help the rest of us want to also contribute, also give back, and also uplift other women. Because I think that's what it's all about at the end of the day. And I can see that's your passion. That's what you do. So let's get right into it. We said at the beginning, you're Bengali by blood, Italian by birth. So, and now you're living in Canada. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and maybe how these different cultures have shaped who you are today? And then when I was writing this question, I'm just going to say before you answer it, I thought, oh my God, I'm doing it. I'm being that person. And I'm sure you've been that person that someone comes up to and is very cringy and says, what are you? Like, you must get asked that, what are you? And so I want to know, like, how did you figure out what you are? And how would you answer that question when people say, who are you?
Basically, that question was asked to me when I moved to Canada.
That's the first time you heard it?
Yeah, it was a struggle. It was the big struggle. In Italy, it wasn't like that. In Italy, like depending on who I would talk, they would just say, oh, you're Italian because you're born in Italy. And so no one would ever question it. They would just tell me what I am, basically. And I would just go with it because I wasn't quite sure what to answer. I was too young to figure out who I was as a person. But then I moved to Canada and people would ask me that question. And one of the questions was also like, what are you from? Mm-hmm. And I never knew what to answer because I was like, do I tell you where I grew up? Do I tell you where I was born? Do I tell you where my parents are from? So it was a real struggle. And this was a big struggle when I went to university because I did university here in Montreal. And what happened is I would spend 20 minutes explaining to the person where I was born, why I look a certain way, why I speak with a certain accent. And what happened is, like at the beginning when I would just like, I never liked spending 20 minutes, especially when I met someone for the first time and there was not enough time to just like sit down and be like, okay, this is my story. And so what would happen is sometimes I would just tell them, oh, I am Italian. And then they would look at me and be like, are you sure? Because you don't look Italian. And then I would say, okay, I'm Bengali. Like if there was another person, I would say, oh, I'm Bengali. And then they would be like, okay, but why do you have like an accent, like an Italian accent when you speak in English? And so no matter what I answered, it was like such a struggle. And then really like 4 years ago, this is when I started to think a little bit deeper about who I am, who I want to be, who do I want to represent. It was really a lot of like inner work that I had to do with myself, have conversation with other people that are more like me to finally like come to the conclusion of who I am as a person. Like I grew up in Italy my whole life. I was born in Italy and my parents basically raised me like a typical South Asian woman. But here's the thing, like when I went to school, I went to like a Catholic school. I went to a school that was like mainly just with the Italian people. So I was never exposed from a young age to the brown community, if that's how you want to call it.
And was there a brown community where you were living in Italy?
So here's the thing.
Okay, sorry, I interrupted, but yeah, I thought it was going to be a simple answer. My bad.
Here's the thing, because my dad always tells me that I was the first Bengali girl to be born in Italy back in the days, because we're talking about the 90s.
Yeah.
And I do believe him because when I went to school, first of all, there were not that many immigrant kids. There were not that many people from South Asia. And there was no one of my age that was Bengali. Like all the people that came were like much younger than me. So I was not exposed too much to brown people. Yeah. It only happened like really afterwards, but they were all much younger than me. And so here is me growing up in a like very Western society, but at the same time in my own household, it was like very much Bengali. And it was a struggle for me because I was like, I don't know where I'm supposed to be fitting in because I feel like I was not fitting in at home. I was not fitting in outside, but I always feel like I was able to be myself when I was among my Italian community because I was so much like around them. I feel like my mentality was a little bit more different than the South Asian one because the South Asian one, it's like, and I'm pretty sure you know it, like especially for the girls, always like, oh, like, you know, yeah, don't do this, don't do that. What will people say? All this crap that I had to deal with. And I always felt like, you know what? Among my Italian friends, I can be myself. I can say whatever I want to say because within like the brown community, I was very much like, I always had to control myself in the way I could like express. So it was always a struggle, I have to say. And this was something that I always like kept within myself. Like I never shared how I felt with other people because there was no one that I could look up to or no one much older than me that I could speak with. And then when I moved to Canada, that's when I started to realize, oh, there are other people like me. There are brown people like me. That's when I started to like speak with other people that had a similar background or like not completely like Bengali, but like maybe Indian or Pakistani with who I could like openly speak about these things. And I started to realize, okay, it's normal the way I used to feel when I was growing up, not able to be enough of anything, or also like not fitting in. Now, like after a lot of work, I feel like, you know what, I do want to embrace both cultures because they belong to me. I am both Bengali and Italian, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, I love the way you talk about just towards the end even, and this is something that I'm learning, is living in the and, not in the or. Like I thought I had to be one or the other. And for me, I call it the white girl complex. I wanted to be white. I wanted to be that way. And I had a lot of Punjabi family, you know, community around us, but I wanted to go that route. And now in my 40s, I'm learning, oh yeah, okay, it's not one or the other. I can be both. Not a white girl, but I can take Western, you know, rituals, cultures, whatever it is that I grew up with, because I did grow, like you, I was born, you know, here. But also I can be Punjabi and I can, you know, be true to my roots. And so that and kind of bridges that gap that we were stuck in, you know, and we're like, which way do I go? A lot of code switching growing up when you have to go home versus when you're with your Italian community.
Yeah. And you know what, this whole thing about like wanting to feel white, I also had that feeling as well when I was growing up, because of the way I was brought up, like because my parents would tell me you cannot do this, you cannot do that. But at some point I was like, okay, I don't like, you know, having this like another ethnicity in me, which is the Bengali side, because it's impossible that like I cannot live like a normal person, you know, like I could not go out, I could not date people, you know, things like that. And at some point I was like, you know what, I just want to be like my white friends, my Italian friends, because I feel like they have so much freedom. Whereas at home, I was always at home, like a typical brown girl, just obedient, listening to what her parents are saying. That was me. That was literally me when I was growing up. Yeah. So I understand how you feel. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm so glad you say that, because in a little bit, we're going to do a middle fingers up segment. And I was going to consult with you during mine. So we're going to come back to this thing. So I'm glad to hear that from you. Okay, so you're also involved in a lot of roles. You're author, speaker, mentor, you in the finances, you're doing a lot. You wear a lot of hats. So what drives your passion across all these different areas?
Some of them are related to the way I was brought up, because, you know, as a South Asian woman, you grew up with so many like limiting, I don't know how to say, like they just limit you. Like the things, people always say things like, you cannot do this, you cannot do that because you're a girl. And because I keep hearing that for most of my life, as I became much older, I was like, where is this written? That we cannot do this, we cannot do that. You know, like, it was like, where is this written? And I wanted to change that, you know, because basically, like, especially like a South Asian woman, this is what they tell you. It's like, if you want to do something, you always have to have like either your brother with you, your father with you, or you have to get married. Your only accomplishment in life is that you get married and you have kids. And I was always thinking about this, and I was like, okay, but why is it like that? Like, why, like, if I want to travel, why do I have to bring like a man with me? You know what I mean? Like, why can I not do this alone? And also like this whole concept that women cannot be independent. That's something that really like made me really mad. Like, I was always furious about this. It's like, I feel like sometimes like if I was a boy, my life would have been easier. And when I think about it, and that's when I was like, you know what, I want to change this. I really want to change this going forward. And that's why like I do a lot of the things that I do right now. Like, I'm very much involved with organizations that are dedicated to women's empowerment. I also work with other organizations that are mainly strictly based in Bangladesh that fight like child marriages. So that has been also another thing that I also was involved with. And also like finance as an industry is also very much male dominated. And again, even finance, when you think about it, like especially in the South Asian community, like women are not taught about finances, which sucks, honestly, because I feel like as a South Asian woman, like when I think about like, you know, aunts, my mom and things like that, like if something ever happens to like, let's say their husbands or anything, these women, they do not know how to like open a bank account. They don't know where the bank accounts are. They know nothing, you know, they don't know the password and stuff like that. And it sucks, because I feel like both women and men should be given the same opportunity when it comes to learning. So that's why I do all of these things, because I think we need to have a more equal balance. And I think especially in the South Asian community where, you know, there's a little bit of like, there are things lacking.
Yeah.
I think we need to change that going forward. So that's why I'm involved in so many of these things.
That's amazing. If I could just share really quick, I don't know if you've heard of, it's a Canadian Punjabi TV show called Late Bloomer. I highly recommend it. And the lead, he created it. He's a comedian, Jasmeet Raina. You might know him. He's a YouTuber. It's a really funny show. There's a scene in there, an episode where the mom, who, like many of our mothers, is running the household. She gets up early when everyone else gets up. She feeds everyone. She leaves the food in the oven. She does the things that are truly a leader, but are never recognized as a leader. And, she's talking to a woman much younger than her that also just immigrated from India with her husband. And you see this interesting connection between these two women. And the mother has like kind of almost like a heartbreaking moment where she's looking at this young version of herself and she's seeing this young girl. She has a job at a coffee shop, Tim Hortons. And the mother says, if my husband, like who did so much for us when he brought us here, he sacrificed, you hear that word a lot, right? He did so much for us. But had he invited me to go out more, get a job, learn how to experience, transportation, these things, maybe I would be a little bit better off now because, the episode is she's struggling with a really simple thing, which is navigating transportation. And it's so interesting because they do such a beautiful job connecting what you and I are talking about in a way where you see these generations and you think, here you and I are in this generation talking about women and empowerment and making these changes. But sometimes when I'm having these conversations, like I can't help but think about our moms and our aunts, our grandmas who just didn't get that. And the kids grew up and, they did all the things like you said in the beginning. You got to get married, you got to have children. And then you have all this time on your hands, but the time is just like, I don't know, creating some kind of hole or emptiness. So I think it's our responsibility to do what you're doing, which is educating ourselves and finding ways to also contribute because our mothers, our grandmothers, our aunts, they sacrificed a lot for us in a way that we're so lucky we have that privilege.
Yeah, you know what? You're definitely right about what you're saying. And like even when I think about my own mother, sometimes like she was always a housewife. She still is a housewife. But when I look at her, I'm pretty sure that, if she was exposed to the things that I am exposed right now, probably she would have done so many other things in her life. And I was just talking about this like literally yesterday with someone. I don't know if you watched this Bollywood movie called English with the Sri Devi, where the Sri Devi is like she's like an immigrant in this new country and she's trying to learn English and like she's just on her own. Like it's a movie that I very much enjoy watching because I feel like it just shows how they're trying, like this woman is trying to empower herself by learning a language. And actually my own mother is learning like English as well because basically, like when I was born in Italy, she never took time to learn Italian, never. So she would literally depend on me and my sister to like translate things, but she was still being able to be independent. Like she would go grocery on her own. She would take the buses on her own. Like she would still do it no matter like this language barrier, But now that because she no longer lives in Italy, she lives in UK. Now what happened is basically like she's taking time to learn English. So sometimes when I call her, she's like, I'm in class. And I'm like, oh, that's so nice to hear that, And every time she says that, I think about that movie because for me, it's a beautiful movie because I think there's so much meaning behind it. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to see that, like there is me and you who are trying to make changes, but then there is also the previous generation that, they're doing little things to change a little bit their lives. So it's nice to see that.
Yeah.
Like I always, it just sucks because I feel like in the past, they were not too much exposed to what we are exposed now. Yeah. So they were not able to fully develop themselves, I think. Their own,
Totally. And, I'm just going to add a piece because you made me think about sometimes when, in our mothers and older elders generation, they took a lot of crap from where, here in Canada, I'm not sure in Italy if your mom would agree, but in hearing from a lot of people on the outside being like, you come to this country and why don't you learn the language? Like you need to learn, you need to adapt. And, as you're talking and I'm thinking about this and I'm like, I think we don't talk enough about the ones that could adapt did. They already knew it, or they learned English or whatnot. But the ones that couldn't, which were many of our grandmas, mothers, aunts, it's what you said, like your mom didn't have the time. They're trying to survive. They're trying to navigate everyday basic stuff. I mean, I've been on vacation to Italy before, and that was 2 weeks of funness, but that's hard. I don't know how to speak Italian. It's hard to navigate, and that's vacation. But if I had to go live somewhere, sometimes we expect just learn the language right away. And I think sometimes with our immigrant parents and relatives, we have to give them a little bit more compassion for what they had to do and what was on the priority list. Like, sometimes learning the language wasn't the way to get the food on the table or whatnot. So I just, you brought that up, and I thought, okay, we should, give a little cheers to our, the immigrants before us that did what they could in the best way to adapt. And here your mom, now she has the time, and guess what she's doing? She's saying, okay, now I'll learn, right? Like, good for her. That's amazing. So yeah. I think you were going to say something to that.
No, that's what I wanted to say as well, that I think like when we think about our own parents, like even my mom and my aunt and other people that moved from Bangladesh to Italy first, but they didn't know the language, but they still survived. And that's still like, it's very admirable at the same time. Because if I think about myself, going completely to a new country where I know nothing about, especially the language, and I'm trying to survive, I think I will have a hard time. So the fact that these women were able to do this, it just shows how strong of like women they are, not knowing the language, not knowing anything, but you're still able to do everything. It's very admirable.
I agree. Yeah, I would agree. And I'm glad that, we took a moment to share that. Okay, back to you. You've done a lot of research, you are very passionate about women, you're doing your own self-awareness and work. So what do you, in your learning journey here, what would you say is the most important thing that you're learning that supports women for women?
You know what? One of the things that I very much enjoy doing is like mentoring and like connecting with other women, because I feel like it's like you learn about other women and the struggles they are going through, and definitely connecting with a lot of brown women. It has helped me to make me a little bit aware of who I am as a person and the struggle that we go through. Because I feel like one of the things that I learned, especially with some like brown organization, was that all of the brown girls that I have met, they all wanna, be independent, live authentically, be unapologetic. And it's nice to see that, because when I was growing up, no one ever taught me about this. No one ever taught me. Not at all. Like, it's especially when I was growing up in Italy, like I was not taught about any of these things. I was always thought about, you just follow your path based on what we tell you, and you don't deviate from it.
Right.
Whereas now I feel like a lot of the women that I've been connecting with, they all try to, let's say, break those cycles and deviate from what's conventional to do the unconventional, but they want to make the unconventional as the normal thing.
That's so cool.
And that's one thing that I've been learning a lot with a lot of the women. They all want to live authentically, just be themselves and follow their hearts, their desires. And basically, they don't want to follow the rules or what was, let's say, written according to the previous generation or the culture that we've been, bringing forward. And so that's one thing that I've been learning.
Oh, that's amazing. What kind of woman do you hope to be described as? Like, what's your hope? What kind of woman are you, trying to develop as you're meeting all these other women around you?
Well, there's one word that comes to my mind right now. Like, if you ask me, which is ambitious.
Yeah.
I do want to come across as a woman with like many dreams, many desires, who wants to achieve a lot of things in life. And I think I'm like doing a lot of these things. Like, I always I'm a big manifester. So everything I want to do, I always try to manifest. I just say it out there. And I feel like it's been working. Honestly, it's been working, and I can see how it's paying me off. And I can see how people react to some of the things that I do, because I feel like, the mentor that I never had, I am the mentor for those younger generation now. And that's what I always wanted to achieve. Like, I want people to look up to me as like a role model, as an inspiration, someone that they can learn from. And so that's what I am like aspiring to be, basically.
Oh, that's cool. So, let's talk about for a second your book. Can you tell us like how you decided, and you're wearing all these hats, and I don't know where in all this you had time to write a book, but okay, you did. It's navigating cultural identity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
your book talks about navigating it as a third culture kid. You talk about your struggles and challenges. And, it again got me thinking a little bit about like many people that can be displaced in a way, whether you're one nationality, but you're born in a different country, you're immigrating, all these kinds of different things that happen when we get pulled from our motherlands in the way we have, or somebody comes and takes people's motherlands and now we have to live in a different way. Like, I just think there's always a search for home. And even though I'm living in the country I was born in, I probably would identify with Canada more than India, but I also feel like I'm on the search, like what is home? And I think of my boys. My boys are half white, half Punjabi. And then I think, oh my gosh, like if someone were to ask them about home, like what would they say? So for you, how would you answer that? What does home mean to you? Where do you identify home is?
Okay, so I have so many things to say about this question, because yes, in my book I do talk about identity, and I talk in my the book itself. I talk about my life in Italy from a perspective of a South Asian woman. And I do talk about, what it felt like having Italian friends, what it felt like, going to a Catholic school while also like I am Muslim, or what it felt like dating. Like all my friends were dating. I couldn't date anyone. I could not talk to a guy, for instance. What it felt like, going out, where like all of my friends, they had the freedom of like going out and I couldn't. Like I was always like, there's always this thing like, oh, what would people say if you're like, if you keep going out, or if you come home late and all this crap. That's why I wrote that book, because I wanted to let all these thoughts out of me, and I wanted to tell people that, like I'm pretty sure there is a brown girl out there who's going through this. I didn't want them to feel alone. And to answer your question about what is home, so here's the thing, like I don't have a physical home right now because my parents kept moving all around Italy. So I was born in Sicily. I lived in Sicily for a couple of years, and then we moved to the north. So we moved to Milano. Before moving, we moved to Milano, and then we went for a year in UK. Then we came back from UK and we settled in Milano. And my parents, what happened is now they don't live anymore in Italy. They went back to UK.
Oh, that's why they're back there. Okay. Yeah.
They went back to UK, and I'm here in Canada, but I love going back to Italy because I consider Italy my home. I don't have a physical home there, but it's my heart is there, because this is where I feel like I can be myself. I can just openly say things where no one is judging me. I actually went back to Italy this year. I went back to the city where I used to live before coming to Canada. And I did a high school reunion. I saw all of my high school friends. And I also went to the house where I used to live. And I looked at the house from outside, and I was just thinking about all the memories that I have there, but I could not go inside. And like my parents don't live there anymore. And in a way, I do feel a little bit jealous when I think about people that were born in a specific country and they've been living in the same house forever, or their parents are living there and they have a place to go back to. I don't have a physical space to go back to. For me, home is a feeling, and I feel Italy is my home. I don't feel Bangladesh is my home because I never lived there. Yeah. I am not able to associate, I'm not able to call it home. And I do call Canada my second home. Oh. But here's the thing. I'm not able to associate myself as Canadian. Like, even though I am Canadian by law, I feel like I'm not there yet. Yeah. Like, I feel I'm more like Bengali and Italian. I truly feel them, but I don't feel I'm Canadian. I don't even feel I'm British, even though my parents live there and I go and visit them. So I think it's a choice that you make at the end, because I'm pretty sure my sister who lives in UK, she probably feels like, I don't know, British Italian or maybe British Bengali. But even though we share the same blood, but we both associate ourselves to two different ethnicity, for instance.
That's really interesting. And like, what advice do you have for people, like the title of your book, they're discovering their identity, they're trying to figure out where home is for them. They have all these other sort of cultural identities that they have to figure out amongst us. So what advice would you give to other people listening about one thing they can do to help them figure out some of the confusion that we can feel at times?
You know what? I always say having like open dialogues with people that you trust, it's a good starting point, because I can tell you one thing. When I used to feel like I was not normal, that I was like going through these feelings of like, not feeling Bengali or not feeling Italian fully, I would speak about it with another friend of mine who also has multiple ethnicity. And she made me see this as, it's not a bad thing that you have this multiple ethnicity, because you're able to bring another perspective of things, because it's a fusion of two cultures. It's not just Italian, it's not just Bengali, but you also have a third vision, which is the Bengali and Italian. And she made me see this more like a strength and an asset, not as a weakness. Mm-hmm. So I used to have like conversations with her, and this has really helped me to get like more a clear idea. I also like try to see communities out there. There are so many like even Instagram pages and organizations out there for third culture kids that you can join. They have like Zoom calls, and you can join those calls, and you can see that there are so many like people like you. And so that really, I would say those are like really starting point. And also like, I try to help other people too who go through the same issues of identity. Like I have a friend who basically, he's Iranian. So he's by blood Iranian. He lived for a couple of years in Italy, and now he lives in the States. So he did school in the States and also in Italy. And then when I first met him, I asked him like, who are you? What do you consider yourself? And he wasn't quite sure about what to answer. He was like, oh, I think I'm like American. But the moment I asked him who is he started to like wonder a little bit about his identity, because every time we would have a conversation, he would talk about how much he loves Italy, how much he likes to go back to Italy. And I was like, do you truly feel like you're American? Because it doesn't seem like it to me. And he would always spend his summer in Italy. He actually bought a house in Italy, and he goes back to Italy often because he feels like this is where I belong. And so like this question of like, who are you, trigger him something. And then now we have conversation about it. And now he's like, you know what? I'm not truly American. I do feel like there is an Italian side of me that I never discovered or took time to, navigate a bit further. So like having this conversation, I think definitely helped.
Yeah, I like that. And I also agree. I think talking it out, writing it out, like, you talked about even trying to be around racialized space, like being around people that look like us. I think sometimes that's a good start too. Sometimes I struggle though, like I can speak Punjabi and I can speak it pretty well, but I sometimes struggle letting myself speak Punjabi because I feel like I'm a fraud. Like I have to remind, I'm like, you are Punjabi, like why? Because I'm not supposed to remind myself, like when I start speaking it, like I don't feel comfortable, but I want to. And I think it's because I haven't done it for so many years. And so when I start to talk with people in Punjabi, I have to remind myself that this is who I am. Like how come it feels so uncomfortable to do that? Did you ever feel that when, because you speak a lot of different languages?
Yeah. So here's the thing. Cause once I was asked by a friend, she was like, oh, what is your biggest regret? And I told her that I wish I took a bit more time on like how to read and write in Bengali, because basically what happened is my parents taught me how to speak Bengali. So I can speak it. I do speak it. And at home, we would always speak Bengali. And then what happened is as soon as I started to go to school, Italian became sort of like my primary way of like, speak to people. And so my parents would speak to me in Bengali. Then I brought Italian at home and I was just speaking Italian with my sister, and I still do it. And this is when I started to realize, okay, I'm speaking two languages at home. And I think these are like, they belong to me. They're part of my identity. However, now that I'm much older, I feel like I wish I took a bit more time to know how to, write it and read it. And that's probably one of my biggest regrets, because I feel like, I associate myself as a Bengali person, but I only know how to speak it. Yeah. Like if I see something written, I don't know how to read it. That's the biggest struggle. And I think it's also like, I don't want to say it's my parents' fault, but I think because you're born in a Western society, they think, okay, she won't need to learn how to, write it or read it. But I think it's always important to take time to like teach your kids also, not just how to speak it, because I think our parents do a good job in like teaching the tradition, cultures, festivity, food, things like that. But I don't think they take time to like really teach us how to write and read, or even like speak it in a proper way, because I'm pretty sure like my Bengali is fine, but I don't know the proper Bengali that it's spoken, in the newspaper, for instance.
Well, and these languages of ours, there's like been reading up a lot lately on how many of them are going extinct because we are born in a different country. Just like you said, our parents think, okay, you should learn the language of the country. You'll have a better life, all that stuff that they put on us. And some families have done a good job. I think, kids like me grew up here learning how to write and read. My parents tried, but it was a lot of work for them to keep us going because as kids, we didn't feel like we didn't identify with it. We wanted to learn the ABCs more than anything, right? Because all our friends did that. So we kind of screwed it up for ourselves too, to be honest. And now I'm like, okay, at least I'm grateful I can speak it, but also you're right. Like to learn how to write it and read it, there's a way, to keep that mother tongue with us. So, but you can be like your mom. It's never too late. You can join a class, right?
Yeah, that's what I was telling. Yeah, that's what I was telling myself. Like it's never too late. Like I always learn it, And I think it's important to preserve these things because they're still part of your culture. Like you said, there are languages that are going to like go away. But the only way to preserve it is if you keep talking and teaching the language. And I think it's very, very, very important. Yeah.
My younger son wants to learn and I keep, putting that on the list. So every time, like so many signs keep coming at me saying, just like this with you now, get him in there. So I should. Can you just tell us a little bit more about a third culture kid? I actually learned this through you. I didn't know this term. So can you tell us a little bit about this, what this means?
Yeah, third culture kids, it's basically kids who are born in a certain country, but their parents belong to another country, and they also grow up in a different country than they are born. So that's pretty much what it means. That you just have multiple ethnicity and third culture kid. They always go through the struggle of like, I don't know how to identify myself. I don't know how to answer the question of who I am as a person, where I am from. And usually it's when you start having this like type of, questions in your head, you start wondering, okay, who exactly am I? Mm-hmm. So it's basically someone who has multiple ethnicity and not feeling you belong to a certain culture, not feeling you belong to the culture of your parents. So this is what third culture kids are basically.
Yeah, that's a lot. Like there's always more. You think you're in a situation where it's complicated for you and then you learn, you're like, oh, wow, there's somebody's going through something even more complicated by navigating these different cultures. And depending on what age, the younger you are, I think the more confusing it can be because you're attached to so much of it. If we're a bit older moving, then maybe you're like, okay, I know that my life was in this other country or whatnot. And so there's a lot there to manage. And any advice or tips, strategies, things that you're learning that are helping you that maybe others listening could take from you?
I think when it comes to culture kids, it's it goes back again to the same thing about being part of the community. Because even this morning, I met someone who was telling me that she is like originally from this country, then she was brought up in another country. She lived in various countries, and like meeting someone that you can talk to and someone who you can relate to really helps to navigate these challenges, because you're not alone in this. It's like it's normal that you have those feelings. And there's actually an Instagram page. I think it's called I forgot the name, but it's specifically for third culture kids. And they have this WhatsApp group that you can join, and you can see that there are other third culture kids, and they start like presenting themselves, and they're like, oh, this is me from this country. I was born there. My parents are from here, this and that. And it's nice to see the diversity, because you're like, the world is like that. Like we don't live in a world where someone is just from a particular country. We have people from like different parts of the world, and it's so beautiful. So we like when you see this kind of community, you try to you start embracing yourself, you start accepting yourself for who you are, and you don't see this diversity as a weakness. Because I think a lot of the kids nowadays, because they're so culture kids, they all feel like this is a weakness, it's a bad thing. But then you start to see things like, I can speak multiple languages because I'm a third culture kid. I visited many countries because I'm a third culture kid. you start to see this more like as an asset, and it's nice to see that you're part of like a community. Yeah.
I love that you say that it can be an asset. And I think it really does, you're right, depend on who we surround ourselves around. And going back to, again, what you said earlier, just that racialized space. So the lovely thing about technology, like you're saying, is there's a bunch of groups and chats and social handles that can connect us to communities that are going through similar things. There's a lot of mental health groups, all those kinds of things that support people, cancer patients, all those things. And I think when you do start to put yourself in a position where you're around more people that have that in common with you, I think like for me, by doing that, has helped me realize where my issues are and where my issues aren't. Cause I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm around these Punjabi girls who are speaking Punjabi with me. This is so cool because I feel so far from it. But every time I'm in a room like that, it brings me closer and closer to, I think, the big picture of what I've been missing all along. Maybe you want to add to that?
Yeah. And you know what? I also think, so here is the thing. I also think it depends on who you have exactly around you. And I'm going to give you a good example about it, because when I moved to Canada, I told myself, oh, I'm going to meet Bengali people. I'm going to have Bengali friends that I never had when I was in Italy, which was something that I always was lacking. Like I always wish I had a Bengali friend, because I feel like they would have understood me better than my Italian friends. As a brown to brown person, you go through the same struggles. And I noticed, here's the thing. I noticed that Bengali people in Italy are different from the Bengali people in Canada, and they're also different from the Bengali people in UK. They're all very, very different from each other. Very different. Like in UK, I noticed that Bengali people are so conservative that this is where I feel like I can never belong to that community. People are like so backward minded. It's even worse than Bangladesh. Like people, they're just stuck in that little like bubble. They only see things a certain way, and it's very backward minded. In Italy, Bengali people are a little bit more open-minded. I think it's because we have a much, much, much smaller community. So because you get exposed so much to like the Italian society, you start to integrate a little bit with the Italian culture. And in Canada, I feel like I see a little bit of both. And it also depends if you speak to a Bengali person or you speak to someone from India, if you speak to someone from like Pakistan or stuff like that. I can see, like when I moved to Canada, I could see like the Bengali girls from here are very different. Like some of them are very like, I don't want to use the word modern, but I don't know how to express the concept. Like it's like I could see the in the way they dress, like in UK or in Italy, if you dress the same way that these girls dress, they would be judged like all the time by people. Yeah. Judge. And here's the thing, like the Bengali girls here, I noticed that, they want to be modern, but then when they're in the community, they act like they're super like Bengali, super religious. But then when they're like outside the community, they behave differently. And sometimes I feel like you're not being honest to yourself, like you cannot behave with two different personalities. Either you're just this or you're just that. And I feel like at the end, some of these girls, like, they try to conform to the society of the what's normal, what the norms are. But I notice like it's very these Bengali girls are very different depending everywhere, on where they grew up, and everywhere. And I feel like I as much as I wish I was able to associate myself with the Bengali girl who was born in Canada, I feel like I was never able to do that. Like I always felt like I was able to connect better with other third culture kids that did not share the Bengali ethnicity.
And I also want to just point out, none of this is to offend any one of us that are from all different. I think it's your observation, it's your experience, because I also experience Punjabi girls different growing up with them here. Like for us here, many of us were just taught to have competition with each other. So right. Unless if it was your cousins and maybe you had a couple of good friends, you would have this connection. But overall, there was always this weird competition. And even at work, if there was two brown girls, we would fight for the spot to be the favorite one with the white people. So it's like, these are my white people. No, these are my white people, because white people can't handle that many, people of color in a room together sometimes. So it always ended up being like we would fight. And you talk about women empowerment, and a word that really is the opposite of it is a lot of times we grew up talking about jealousy. like, oh, she's jealous of me or she's jealous of that person. And you even hear it on these stupid TV shows like Selling Sunset, like, oh, she's just jealous. And, I think we had a disservice learning that way, because I think we could have really benefited from uplifting and supporting. But I think it's really hard for women my age or older to see a woman, South Asian woman that's trying to be helpful or something, because we're just not used to allowing ourselves to. It doesn't mean we're all not kind. It just means we're not allowed to show that side of ourselves.
If I could further add to this, it's like going back to this like friendship and things like that. Like, I know that I always wanted to look for a Bengali friend when I moved to Canada or Montreal in general, but every time I try to approach a Bengali girl, because like, let's say I wanted to be friends with her and I hang out with her, I start to realize that it's not working, because it goes back to jealousy, taking the spot. Like, even at work, I met so many Bengali girls, but none of them want to be my friend.
You weren't taught that there's room for all of us at the table. We were taught there's one seat and you better fight for it. And yeah. I don't think the women mean to be that way. I just think that's just how many grow up, and not all. For me, I was that way. I'm the only brown girl around here, the rest of you. And, like, I myself have had to come to that place and realize, how is that helpful? There should be like 100 brown girls sitting at this table. There's lots of room. Build another table with chairs, instead of thinking there's not enough seats at the table, And I think that's the shift with what maybe you're trying to do, and what some South Asian women that are out there, doctors that I've talked to, mental health advocates, just everyday women that are saying, okay, we have to like help each other. Otherwise it gets lonely, like we need each other because we get each other, but yet we don't know how to be around each other. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I do think there are a lot of like South Asian organizations out there that you can join. And there's so many, especially like in Toronto, they're all dedicated to building communities of South Asian women. And it's nice to see that. It's nice to see that sort of like sisterhood.
Yeah.
It's just that like, for me, it was hard to navigate this, moving to Canada. Like, if you ever ask me like, oh, do you have like Bengali friends? I will tell you I don't. And I deliberately made that choice.
Right.
I did, because of these encounters that I had. Like, I never had one when I was growing up, and I'm okay not having one right now. But it's not because I have something against them. It's just that I'm not able to click the way I want to click with them. I think like we just, it's just different. I feel like it's different depending on which country you go to. And there are other things also that I noticed, like, especially when I was growing up, it's not just about like, friendship, but also like dating, like if you go to UK, people are so conservative that you can only marry within like your community. People look at the last name, your caste. People look at your last name. Like, you cannot marry someone who's like outside of your caste or, outside of your community. You cannot marry someone from a different religion and stuff like that. And however, in Canada, I see Bengali girls marrying Pakistani guys or things like that. And I feel like people are very much open and welcoming to those things, I feel like in a sense, Canada has progressed in that sense, whereas some other countries are still like stuck to that idea. So it changes depending on where you are, where you grow up. Yeah. So these are also other things that I noticed when I moved to Canada.
I think it's really helpful to speak with people around us that, like you, like coming from a different part of the world, because growing up here, maybe that's not how I would see it, but to have you come here and immigrate to Canada and say, this is what I'm noticing, I think that's lovely, because you have a different perspective coming here than same thing growing up in Italy and me coming to Italy, and maybe I'll notice some things. And I think it's always nice to have those kind of conversations together. And one doesn't mean one's right or wrong. It just means we learn from each other. But that's very interesting that's, that you feel there's more progression over here, because maybe someone like me would say, no, there isn't. So it's helpful for me to hear, oh, maybe there is. And I have to stop and give us some credit about the things that we are doing well, because we always, want to be better. So I think there's interesting things. And in all of that, like we're talking about identity, right? Like in all of that, it's figuring out, where do I fit in? Where's my role? And it's hard when you look like someone and you can't fit in, and when you don't look like someone, but maybe you fit in more with them. But then, there's other complicating factors with that. Like it's hard once you start to realize how much your identity is connected to everything that happens and, in the people we interact with.
Yeah. And you see it in like what you eat, in the way you dress, in what languages you speak, because these are the things that made me realize my identity. Like, I love eating pasta. I can eat pasta nonstop. I speak Italian. I feel like I'm myself when I'm speaking in Italian. But at the same time, I also like to wear our traditional, clothes, like our saris and things like that. It's the little things that made me really aware of like who I want to be, who I am. Like, it's like, if it wasn't for the fact that, like, let's say I love, like, that I love speaking Italian, or I love eating pasta, or I'm bringing Italian in my, like, as part of my identity, I don't think I would have ever realized it. So it's the little actions, my habits on a daily basis that made me realize that, I am Italian as well. I'm not just Bengali just because, by blood I'm Bengali. Like, there's another part of me that I want to embrace. And I think it's important for me also to embrace it, because I spent most of my life in Italy. And if I don't say that I'm Italian, I'm not saying 50% of who I am, 50% of my story. So it's a big chunk of my identity. So that's why it's like I realized it through all these little things that I used to do when I was like nowadays, when I was a kid.
I'm just going to say, like, today you and I talked a little bit about identity, talked about what growing up was like, talked a little bit about your book. But at the beginning of the conversation, I had shared a little bit about my white girl complex, and you said, oh, that's a little bit about my journey too. And I had mentioned we'll get back to that when we do our middle fingers up segment. But as we were talking today, I'm actually going to suggest we don't do our middle fingers up segment today. I know, but you come back and we do a little episode for the middle fingers, because I wanted to spend some time on it with you today, and I wanted to ask you for your advice. And after you told me that you had some similar, white girl stuff growing up, I think it'd be a conversation we could just dedicate an episode, like a middle fingers up to the white girl complex. And we can break some of that apart. So if you have an extra middle fingers up, you can say that now, but save your good one for when we get together.
No, I'll save the good one for when we get together.
Okay. We don't need that much time, but I think there's a reason why you and I were meant to do this recording. And I realized while we were talking that we can spend more time on the middle finger. So I'll tell you about that a little bit more after. So
what? The middle finger.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I'll make you wait. But at least I remember. There's been times where I forgot, 2-3 times where I didn't even ask the guest. So I was like, no, I did remember, but we're going to change it. So why don't we do this? So why don't we leave with, is there anything that you wish that I did ask you today, or that you want to go back and talk about before we wrap up?
That's a very good question, actually. I don't have, honestly, anything in specific. Yeah, I can't think of anything right
it's
now.
It's okay. And you're coming back. So if something else comes up, you can bring it up there, because the middle fingers up segment that we're going to dedicate an episode to, I'm sure the identity will come up in there. So, okay, then how about you leave us with a call to action? So if there's only one thing that our listeners either listen to, or go and do, or think about, what would you hope that one thing about what we talked about today would be?
So here's the thing that I would like to tell people. It's don't let people's opinion dictate your life. And that's because, especially as a brown girl, we often tend to do things because we want to get validation, we want to feel accepted, we want to please people. But I think it comes with a big cost, because we are sacrificing our own happiness to make other people happy. But you know what? It's never enough. So just live your life in your own terms.
I love it. That's well said. Very empowering. Okay. And where can people find you? Because like I said, you're everywhere, and I want to make sure that I get them all right. So I'll also add them in the show notes when your episode comes out. But maybe you can leave the listeners with where they can find you.
Yes. So I have a YouTube channel. It's called Urmi Hossain. I have a LinkedIn profile called Urmi Hossain. I have my blog called My Instagram page is called Urmi. My book is available on Amazon. It's called Discover Your Identity, A Rebirth from Intergenerational Struggle. And then I am part of two organizations. One of them is called Women in Leadership, and I am part of the Victoria chapter. So even if you just type Women in Leadership Victoria chapter, you will see the website. And the other organization is called Fan Influence. And it's an organization based in South Africa. And basically what we do is we empower the women in the community. So these are all the places where you can find me.
Perfect. I love it. And like I said, we'll add it to the show notes. Okay, so I'm going to thank you for stopping by today, but you're coming back, so I won't say goodbye. But I want to thank you for sharing your story, your insights. It's great that you're talking about the things that we don't talk about so we can have books like yours out there. So there's more data and more research the more we talk about these issues. So I love that. I really hope that, others listening, know that these conversations are door openers. So if you want to be part of this conversation and add on, if you have feedback, maybe you have something a little bit better to share in terms of advice, because we're all wanting to learn about our identity and maybe you want to give us some feedback, you know where to find us. Otherwise, thank you so much, Urmi, for being here today. And we're going to book so that we can get that Middle Fingers episode, actually.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you have a great evening and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.